Nothing scares me more than when someone goes missing and massive searches are conducted, yet they seemingly vanish into thin air. But then sometime later, their bodies are found so close to where they went missing, in areas that have definitely been searched. Prime example of this is what happened to this man right here. He called 911 and told the dispatcher that someone was chasing him. The dispatcher hung up for some reason, and by the time police got there, he was gone. A huge search was put together which revealed nothing, but 5 months later, his skeletal remains were found incredibly close to where he went missing. And what makes this case even creepier is the state of his body. He was missing a tooth, which was mysteriously replaced before he got to the funeral home, and his lower jaw was a completely different color than the rest of his bones. You want to know the crazy part? This case is closed as just a tragic accident. At least that's what the police say. But I know that whatever happened to him is incredibly sinister, and someone knows more than they are letting on. So let's talk about it. This is Timothy Dees. He went by Timmy. He was only 25 years old when he suddenly disappeared in 2022. Timmy was really close with his mom and dad and his older brother named Michael, and they all lived in Missouri. Timmy was described as sweet, funny, he loved to joke around, and his main passions were dancing and music. At 18 years old, he moved to Creve Coeur, Missouri for a really cool job opportunity. For years leading up to his disappearance, Timmy worked for St. Louis's Local 6 as a stage rigger. So he would set up concert venues and operate lights. This allowed him to stay in his favorite line of work, music. Overall, life was really good for Timmy. But in June of 2021, the Dees family would suffer a devastating loss. Timmy's older brother Michael would die suddenly from an overdose. This really wrecked the family, but in a way, it kind of made them grow closer. Little did anyone know that just 8 months later, Timmy would also go missing and die under extremely mysterious circumstances. This brings us to February 25th, 2022. This is the very last time that Timmy's mom would ever see him alive, as he was at her house hanging out. This is when Timmy's childhood friend named Caleb came over. The two had planned to go to Fredericktown for the entire weekend to have some fun, so off they went. This wasn't unusual for them, and they did this a handful of times. Fast forward a few days later to February 27th, 2022. Timmy was seen for the very last time at around 1:30 that morning via a security camera at a local gas station. There he withdrew $160 from an ATM and bought some Gatorades for himself and his friends. So Caleb and two other guys who were acquaintances of Caleb's. All four of them played the slot machines at the gas station for a little bit before walking out of frame. And what happened after this has never been explained. A few hours later, so now around 4:40 a.m., someone calls 911 from Timmy's cell phone. To this day, no one knows who actually called the police, but we're under the impression that it was Timmy. Anyway, Timmy told the dispatcher that he was being chased and that he was being threatened by one of his friends who brought him to Fredericktown earlier that day, aka his childhood best friend, Caleb. Get ready to be mad, because usually 911 calls are recorded, but this one wasn't. Apparently, the recording equipment went down a few months prior to this. So due to a technical issue, this specific 911 call wasn't recorded like protocol. Maybe that would have been okay had the dispatcher stayed on the call with him until police arrived on scene. Again, like protocol. But this dispatcher hung up, leaving Timmy scared and all alone with no help. According to the police report, an officer arrived to the scene, which was a house near Madison County Road 277, just 8 minutes later. But within those 8 minutes, Timmy vanished off the face of the earth. At the house, though, police found 3 other men: Timmy's best friend, Caleb, and the 2 other acquaintances of Caleb's that I mentioned earlier. Now, it's known that Caleb was reportedly the one that was threatening Timmy, yet police took his and the other 2 guys' words that Timmy had willingly left before the officer got to the house. Also, I don't know whose house this was exactly, just that they were all supposedly there hanging out. The officer believed them and decided that it wasn't important to go looking for Timmy, even though it was super cold out. But this is where the story starts to take a turn, because after running Caleb's information, the police officer noticed that he had a warrant out for his arrest in another county for unrelated issues. So again, instead of looking for Timmy, especially now with this new information, they instead just arrested Caleb on the spot and took him to jail. A few days came and went, and Timmy never reached back out to his mom and dad, which was highly unusual. Like I said, ever since his brother died, the family was incredibly close and they would always stay in touch. Finally, on March 2nd, when it was still radio silence from Timmy, his mom officially reported him missing. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the Madison County Sheriff's Office immediately did not take this case seriously. They didn't have any urgency scheduling a search for Timmy, so it forced his family to come down to Fredericktown and organize it themselves. At this point, it had been days with no contact from him, and the friends he was with the night he went missing were acting a little bit suspicious. None of their stories matched or added up at all, and Caleb, who was Timmy's childhood best friend, told investigators the last time he saw Timmy was early that morning before he called 911. I guess Timmy stepped outside to use the bathroom and just never came back, so his parents really stepped up and put together a big search for their son, involving tracking dogs, volunteers, and even their own PI. During the search, one of the tracking dogs alerted to a storage unit across the street from where Timmy called 911 that night, the house that the officer went to and found Caleb and his friends. Like, it was right in front of the house, basically. Anyway, the dog hit on storage units 5 and 6. One unit was opened and searched, but for some mysterious reason, police wouldn't allow the other unit to be opened and searched too. It was super weird and honestly kind of suspicious because authorities had the owner's full permission, and it's been reported that that specific unit was rented by the local high school's resource officer. But still, authorities refused to search it. I can't imagine how the family must have been feeling at this point because the dogs were definitely hitting on something inside of that unit, but police refused to open it up and find out what it was. Sadly, the search had to go on, which it did, but absolutely no trace of Timmy was found. It really seemed like he vanished into thin air. Like I said, the police didn't really seem to care to investigate this case, so Timmy's mom had to do all of the hard work. She was actually able to pull a receipt from his debit card that provided some sort of clue. This receipt showed that Timmy's debit card was unsuccessfully used 3 times at 9:11 a.m. on February 28th, so 4.5 hours after he called 911. All the receipt said was, quote, "failed to read EMV card." End quote. So one possible explanation was that someone tried to use it with the wrong PIN, but this could have other explanations. We just don't know. And we don't know who it was that tried to use this card either, which is frustrating. Although this lead only posed more questions, Timmy's parents were hoping this was him and that he was okay, maybe just off somewhere needing space. But sadly, this was not the case, and just 5 months later, a horrific discovery would be made. On July 21st, 2022, police were searching a remote private property in Madison County when they stumbled across skeletal remains in a dry creek bed. After DNA testing, this was confirmed to be the body of Timmy Dees. And the sad and confusing part is that his remains were found less than 184 yards away from where he made the 911 call that night, which also just so happened to be next to the storage unit that the tracking dogs alerted to. Found with his remains were his wallet, his ID, and his debit card that was mysteriously used hours after he went missing. Somehow, it ended up back in his pants pocket. Another big thing that was found with his remains is this yellow thing right here. Nobody really knows what it is, and his parents say that it does not belong to Timmy. But some people think that it's a tracker, while others think that it's a key fob that leads to somewhere, they just don't know where. Regardless, it did not belong to Timmy, so the biggest question is, who does it belong to, and why was it found with Timmy's remains? After this discovery, Timmy's mom was called in to further identify his remains, and a few things immediately stood out. One was that one of his teeth was missing and his permanent retainer was gone. Then there was this really weird small hole right behind his front teeth, kind of right behind where the missing tooth should have been. Another thing that really stood out is that Timmy's lower jaw was a completely different color than the rest of his bones. So seeing as though this looked really suspicious and she already didn't fully trust the police, Timmy's mom took pictures of his remains for her own record. When she went to go see him at the funeral home shortly after, the weirdest thing happened. His tooth that had previously been missing was now mysteriously replaced back into his mouth. What's even stranger is that there was no mention of a missing tooth or a weird hole in his mouth on the autopsy report. So this has led many people to question whether or not that tooth, or even the lower part of his jaw, was even his. For some reason, this kind of screams cover up. What that reason is, I don't know, but this is all really weird. But going back to the autopsy report, the medical examiner noted no obvious signs of trauma. So officially, they don't know how Timmy died. No signs of a stabbing or bullet holes, no signs of trauma at all. At least not per their recording, which I don't really know what to believe at this point. To this day, Timmy's cause of death is listed as undetermined. Police think that he and his friends were doing drugs the night he disappeared, and then he somehow just ran into the woods and accidentally died from an overdose, that no foul play is involved. I could see their logic behind this had there been proof that he was doing drugs, but due to the state of his remains, a toxicology was not performed. On top of this, how do you explain his missing tooth, or that small little hole in his gums, or the different colored jaw? Like, none of that makes any sense. I know all sorts of things can happen to expose bones in the woods, but I'm just assuming that all of his bones would be the same color if they were all exposed for the same period of time, and also in the same location. So that doesn't make any sense to me. Police have since closed this case, and they don't believe that foul play was involved. But a few more things happened that make me feel otherwise. So 1 month after Timmy went missing, someone logged into his Facebook account. Whoever did this checked into Fredericktown on March 27th, 2022. I don't know what the purpose of this would be, but it's clear as day that this wasn't Timmy, as he was already dead at this point. I saw someone comment on a Facebook post about Timmy that they'd been sending him Snapchats during the time that he was missing, and someone was opening them. This is super weird to me, especially because his phone was never found. All of his other personal belongings were, but not his phone. So whoever had it was doing all of this, which is really risky in my opinion. That could be easily tracked, yet it doesn't seem like the police fully looked into this. I feel like they already had their mind made up that this was an accident, so they never really investigated this case. A lot of people point some level of suspicion to his friend Caleb. I mean, Timmy referred to him being the one threatening him that night, and police did find texts between Caleb and Timmy that alluded to a fight. It was reported that Caleb was mad over some stolen gasoline or something like that, and Caleb was even texting multiple other people that he was furious with Timmy. As far as I can find, no other evidence was found though linking him to Timmy's suspicious death. It's all just circumstantial, and Caleb remains adamant that he had nothing to do with his friend's disappearance and death. I have no idea what could have happened to Timmy that night, but I strongly believe that this was no accident, that someone out there knows more than what they're saying. The biggest question I have is obviously what happened to his tooth, but also what was inside that storage unit. It seems like it would have been a great place to store a body, or at least some evidence of the crime. But since police refused to search it, we will never know. It makes me wonder if someone hid Timmy's body in the storage unit and then moved it after they were done searching, since his remains were found so close to where he went missing. If you want to help Timmy's family get justice, there's an online petition that you can sign that I'll have linked in my bio. It's to urge local police to reopen this case and give it a proper investigation from start to finish, to even see if they can find a real cause of death, because the not knowing is destroying his family. In less than a year, they lost both of their children, and they just really deserve answers. But it's now been 4 years, and whatever really happened to Timmy that night remains a mystery.